Hey, welcome back to Life on the Wrist. Hope you're doing well. Today I thought we would talk about 4 alternatives to movement watches that you can buy between $50 and $500. But before we get into that, as always, if you would not mind subscribing to the channel, really would help us out, and if you like it, of course, that would always be greatly appreciated. So we decided we were going to talk about 4 alternatives of movement watches. Movement watches are classified as fashion watches. This can include companies like Hugo Boss, Armani, Michael Kors, and obviously Movement. And the way I think they're classified as fashion watches is they come out with the company's seasonal styles, so part of their collections for each season. So a lot of the times they match the styles that they're trying to portray in those collections, and they're supposed to be matched with those types of outfits and colors and combinations. A lot of the times they're manufactured at a lower cost, being that they need to sell them for between $50 and $500. So the components that go into them are oftentimes described as cheaper. And a lot of the times they are quartz movements that are mass produced and, keep costs down so they can sell them at a reasonable price so that they can be sold as accessories to the outfits that they are ultimately selling to their clients. A lot of the times there's so much branding and marketing that's done for these watches in advertising to their customers so that they can see how the watches would match with their outfits and such. So I think that in a nutshell is how we're going to describe fashion watches. I think if you are in fashion, if you like fashion watches, but you're trying to transition into the Swiss watch industry, these 4 alternatives will help you make that transition very simply by, these are going to be matching perhaps the styles that you like, but also will help you be a little bit more individual in your taste, because that's probably what you're seeking when it comes to these fashion watches. So my first watch, and being that I love vintage watches, my first alternative is Vintage Omega. I think Vintage Omega provides you with such a large variety of styles for the watches, style variations, and they go between about $300 and $500 right now. It's February 2019, who knows what it will be in a couple years, but between $300 and $500. But there's so many variations that you can find that will match your taste, and a lot of the times they're simple watch style designs, which is kind of what a lot of the fashion watches are going for. For example, Movement has very simplistic dials, which makes it easy to read. Omega does the exact same thing. I think if you're going to transition into Vintage Omega, you're also going to be provided with the Omega heritage that comes with owning an Omega. They have such a vast and really great history when it comes, Speedmaster for NASA and Seamaster with, James Bond. So you're gonna get that heritage when purchasing these watches. Also, being that this is vintage, you're gonna get a great service center that Omega has. They take really great care of their clients. They provide them with all the information that they possibly can about these watches, as well as take care of the servicing that needs to be done for these pieces. It's also a lot easier to source Omega parts for that service center, so you'll be covered on the maintenance of your watch very nicely, being that you're kind of going into the vintage space. I will say, before you buy Vintage Omega, make sure you do as much research as you possibly can so that you understand Vintage Omega, the references you're trying to buy, all the components with the movement, before purchasing and putting down money on these watches, because it's a lot of money and you don't want to get burned very easily. So be careful with that alternative, but it's definitely something that you should consider. The second watch is the Tissot Tradition. This watch retails for about $300, but it's a very simple dial. So when I looked at the Movement watch, I was thinking, okay, people are trying to get, simple dials, easy to read, very legible, and the Tissot Tradition does that exactly. It's hours, minutes, and seconds, that's it. And that's exactly, it plays within that kind of muted palette that kind of you can then match with a lot of different types of outfits that your fashion brands may be releasing. It is a quartz movement, which means it's very easy to use. I know a lot of people hesitate getting into vintage, or getting into, more traditional watches, because they don't want to have to deal with the hassle of automatic movements or manual wind movements. They want something very simple, and that's exactly what it is. You put a battery in it, it's good to go. Also, Tissot has great brand heritage, just like Omega. It's been around for forever, yeah, great brand heritage. that can come with purchasing that first watch that kind of moves you into the watch industry. The third alternative I have is Alpina. Alpina retails for a little bit more, but on the secondhand market you can find it for a lot less. I think they are a robust company. Their case is a little bit tougher. If you're not trying to find something that you have to baby, very high quality cases that will allow you to, knock it around a little bit more. And there's so many variations, from dive watches to chronographs to very simple variations of it. I think Alpina is a great way to get into the watch hobby. There are quartz movements, automatic movements, depending on your taste and perhaps your preferences. And also, again, heritage. They've been around since late 1800s. So, been in Le Loc for forever. So, again, you're getting great heritage with the brand, and people will respect what you have on your wrist and the tradition that comes behind it. And the fourth alternative, and for me is my favorite alternative to the movement watch, is the System 51 from Swatch. I guess Swatch in general, but for me, if you go for Swatch, look at the System 51. The System 51 was launched by Swatch to make a watch movement with the least amount of components possible. So, as it states in the name, this watch was made with 51 components, as opposed to other watch companies which makes watches with 300, 400, 500 components. Swatch said, you know what, let's run counter to that. Let's make a watch with 51 parts. So I think it was very unique of them to kind of go counter to what watchmaking is. And if you have that kind of it's a little bit edgy, we're gonna do something completely opposite. If you like that, I think it's a perfect watch for you to get into. Again, Swatch it's been in the watch industry forever. I really like the fact that there's so many different variations of Swatch watches. There are also a lot of variations with the System 51, so you can be unique and have a watch collection, a watch that you won't see very often on people's wrists, because you can align your taste with what you decide to purchase. There are quartz watches, there are automatic watches, swatches. So that's a tongue twister. So there's quartz, there's automatic. You're covered on that side. But again, like the System 51, I think it's a perfect way to get into watchmaking. They also have really great services. Basically, if something breaks in that movement, they just take the movement out and replace it with another one, being that it's only 51 parts. It allows for them to do that. So those are my four alternatives. Again, they are Vintage Omega, the Tissot Tradition, Alpina, and the Swatch System 51. I think those are great ways for you to get into the watch industry and really move away from fashion watches if that's what you're trying to do. And these are alternatives where you can, start talking about watches with people and still match it with your, your fashion company that you're trying to, portray. Let me know if you guys have any alternatives to movement watches or fashion watches in general. I know that there are so many different ones, but these are the four that I would probably move towards. Again, it's my own personal taste. I'm sure there's watches that you guys have, like Seiko and Casio, and Vintage Longines has some great watches as well. So let me know in the comments what your alternatives are. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe, like this video, and I hope you guys have a nice rest of your day.